This is an ordinary TV video game. This is Vectrex, the only video game system with its own video screen. Take it anywhere. Just plug it in. It's your own personal arcade.
Vectrex, it stands alone.
Hi everyone, I'm Tyler, and welcome to another episode of Player One Start. Today we're going to talk about the Vectrex. So let's go ahead and dive into a little bit of history. The year is 1981. The golden age of video games are in full swing. Pac-Man and Donkey Kong are practically consuming every quarter in the arcade, and Atari's video computer system is dominating the home video game market. At this point in the industry, many video games are using sprite-based graphics. The use of sprites continues in some variation to this day. However, an alternative form of graphics, even still today, is known as vector graphics. Vector graphics had a clear advantage of showing 3D environments as well as scaling and rotating objects on a screen smoothly. This is due to vector graphics using polygons rather than bitmap sprites. Games like Asteroids, Lunar Lander, and Battlezone all used vector graphics in the arcade. However, in the early 1980s, no company had attempted to bring vector-based graphics to the home market. The Bally Astrocade, Mattel Intellivision, and Magnavox's Odyssey 2, as well as the Atari 2600, all use sprites and bitmap graphics. This is mainly because vector graphics had some drawbacks in the home marketplace. Vector graphics were not able to generate color. Many arcade machines solved this problem by putting color overlays over the monitors. Another disadvantage to vector graphics is that they cannot be used to generate realistic pictures. Many early games had wireframes as surfaces could not be shaded. In 1981, Mike Purvis and John Ross at Western Technology/Smith Engineering were trying to come up with a way to use a lot of cheap CRT screens that the company had picked up from a liquidator surplus store. They came up with the idea for a small, all-in-one home gaming system using vector graphics. In September of 1981, a company by the name of General Consumer Electronics, or GCE, had decided to lease the mini-arcade after GCE's president, Greg Krakauer, saw the concept and early workings and decided it was a potential goldmine. A few modifications to the game system were made, including a larger 9-inch screen, and the name was changed to Vectrex. Work began on the actual Vectrex prototype, with the goal being to have the hardware and 12 games completed by June of 1982. The Vectrex arcade system was introduced on June 6th of 1982 at the Summer CES show and became available for purchase at $199 in October that year. The Vectrex wasn't just an average game console at the time. Even to this day, there's not been a video game system quite like it, with the exception of the Nintendo Switch. Its built-in vector monitor and detachable controller captured a sleek look and feel. When the Vectrex shipped in 1982, it included the game Minestorm, which is basically an Asteroids clone. A recessed handle on the back allowed the unit to be easily picked up and carried. Although its heavy weight kept it from being a true portable system, still families liked the Vectrex since its built-in screen allowed it to be played without tying up the family TV set. Very few homes in the early 1980s had multiple TVs.
Oh, honey, he's teasing you. Nobody has two television sets.
Now usually this is where the origin of a console would end. However, in March of 1983, Milton Bradley decided they wanted to get into the video game business and purchased GCE, thus acquiring the Vectrex with the purchase. Milton Bradley already had an established games distribution channel and quickly expanded the Vectrex's distribution overseas. By summer of 1983, distribution had begun in Europe and Japan, but then
the familiar din of the video arcade is fading out. Business has dropped in half over the past year, and companies like Atari claim losses of more than $350 million. The slick, swift-paced space games are taking a nosedive, and analysts predict a crunch in the industry by Christmas. The craze has definitely peaked.
At the end of 1983, the great video game crash had occurred. Milton Bradley had to close down GCE and decided to distribute the Vectrex itself. discounting it as much as possible. This plan lasted until March of that year, when they discontinued sales in Europe and slowly phased out the US. Milton Bradley released all rights back to Smith Engineering by the time they were done. Alright, next up, let's go ahead and check out that hardware. Alright, let's start by taking a look at the controller. So the controller has a joystick as well as 4 control buttons. Some games use all 4 of these buttons. On the back you'll see the Vectrex logo. What's unique about this controller is that it folds completely into the system. Let's go ahead and take a look at the back. I'm being very gentle as I don't want to disturb any of the parts inside. So you'll see there's a brightness control knob on the back that you can use to adjust the brightness of your display. And there's also a severe warning on here not to remove the back unless you are really knowing what you're doing. And since I don't want to risk the electrical shock part and I don't want to damage my console, I'm not going to take this one apart. On the side you'll see the cartridge slot. It uses a simple ROM style cartridge. However, this one is a brand new cartridge, it's the multi-cart, which has a whole bunch of games on it at once. I believe this has all of the official release games on it. Here's what the inside looks like. If you take a look at the board here, you can actually identify the parts based on the schematic. First we'll look at the CPU. It uses an MC68A09 Motorola CPU, which runs at 1.5 MHz. The system has 1 KB of RAM and 1 built-in game on a ROM chip. The graphics chip is an MOS6522, which is known as the Versatile Interface Adapter, and that's what's responsible for generating the vector graphics. It also has a sound chip that is hooked up to a 3-inch paper cone speaker. When the Vectrex was first released, it was released by GCE in 1982 for $199. That's the equivalent of $490 this year. When Milton Bradley bought out the company, they reduced the price to $149. Eventually though, due to the video game crash, this was quickly reduced to $99 that same year, and by the end of the year, it was selling for $49. So the Vectrex is actually the rarest and the most expensive console that I own in terms of collectability. So I wasn't really trusting myself to take this console apart. It's already working, so I really don't see the need to. Also, since this console has its own CRT built into the console, there's another issue we need to address: the high voltage electronics in the screen. So it is actually possible to severely hurt or even kill yourself on these old electronics. So you really don't want to go start poking around in these things unless you know exactly what you're doing. Alright, we've had a look at the history and we've had a look at the hardware. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the gameplay. So this is the startup screen you will see every time you boot up your Vectrex. I decided to start with the built-in game. This is Minestorm. It is kind of like an Asteroids clone. As you can see, I added the overlay to give it some color graphics. It also gives some instructions for the buttons that are on the controller. Alright, let's take a look at another game. This is Berzerk. This was also released for the Atari and other consoles in the early 1980s, and this is actually a pretty good version. I decided to show you what it looks like without an overlay on it, so you can kind of get a feel of why I have the overlay on there. And here's the game with the overlay. Alright, here's a game called Hyperchase. This game is most similar to something like Pole Position, although Pole Position was also released for this console. The first thing I noticed is how sensitive the joystick is. I flew right into the wall just by barely nudging the stick. Alright, this game's called Heads Up, and it is actually a soccer game. Now, I'm not a big fan of soccer, but I can casually play it on a video game. The controls are really simple, although sometimes when you're passing the ball, it actually goes, I guess, wherever it wants to, at whatever force it wants to. I'm not sure I fully understand how to play this game. But overall, I found the game enjoyable, and really realistic when it comes to how high the score gets in a game.
Go!
Scramble is one of my favorite games for the console. It's actually one of those games that you can just pick up and play, so the goal is to get as far as you can, while defeating enemies and collecting enough fuel so you don't crash. There's a few checkpoints you hit, but overall, it's not a bad game. I really enjoy the sound that's made when you crash your ship. Alright, next is Star Trek, the motion picture, The Game. And I gotta tell you, I don't know what movie they were watching, but the game is actually really good, and I would like to have seen some battle scenes like this in the movie. Unfortunately, the movie is what it is. Alright, so Web Wars is a game that actually shows off the capabilities of the Vectrex, especially its 3D rotation and scaling effects. In this game, you are the Hawk King who must fly through a web of fantasy and capture 20 different creatures. However, each creature is protected by a guardian, so you have to battle the protectors of each of the animals in order to capture the creatures. However, if you fail to miss an animal capture twice, the Cosmic Dragon will come in and start shooting fireballs at you.
So the only games that I covered are the ones that I actually own complete in box.
It's actually almost necessary to collect these complete in box because you'll want those overlays to go over the screen to give you some color graphics. I didn't think it was going to be that important when I first got this console, but the more games I played, the more I wish it had some sort of color graphics to break up some of the monotony of gameplay. Alright, so what are my thoughts on the Vectrex? I first learned about this console when I read Stephen L. Kent's The Ultimate History of Video Games, and I have been intrigued by this console ever since. That was around the year 2001 and 2002, and since then I've been keeping my eye on the collector's markets either in my local region and on places like eBay and Craigslist. And I have to say, this was a multi-year search. These things don't show up too often online, and when they do, they're not likely to be cheap. The reason why I ended up getting one is because I found an eBay seller that was selling this for what I thought was a ridiculously low price. It was so low priced that I thought there has to be something wrong with this console. But it was even lower priced to a point where I was willing to take the risk. So it was with much anticipation that I opened this package up when I got it in the mail. I took it out of the box, and lo and behold, as soon as I plugged it in and plugged in a game cartridge, it worked flawlessly. There is absolutely nothing wrong with this console. You may notice there's some buzzing with the sound whenever you turn it up really high, but that's actually common with these older consoles. It gets a little worse because capacitors can end up swelling inside of there, and you can fix that, but mine's at a point where it's not really too bad. About a week after I got this console, the seller on eBay contacted me and said, "Oh, by the way, I found the boxes and the overlays for the games I gave you. These games were just the cartridges, they didn't have the overlays or the boxes, but I wasn't really too concerned about that since I was getting a fantastic deal on this console." And I was just shocked. I'm like, okay. I thought he was just going to send me the boxes for the 4 games that I got, but instead he ended up sending me an additional 4 or 5 games, complete in the box with the overlays. Having that background knowledge and knowing I was looking forward to playing this console for so long, did it live up to my expectations? I have to say, it did. It actually surpassed them. If I would have got this console in 1982, knowing that the only other consoles I would be playing were the Atari 2600, the Mattel Intellivision, when you compare it to this console is great. It's actually portable. I could have taken this over to my friend's house and showed off the unique graphics display and played 2 players with them. This is actually probably the first real portable game console. It doesn't take batteries at all, mainly because of the high voltage display that's built into it. There are some limitations. First off, it can only display vector graphics. There are no shaded sprites. So the graphics, while they would have been very impressive in 1982, are a little bit dated today. There's not too many games today that use the graphics mode of vector graphics anymore, mainly because we now use shaded polygons. I do think that having the speaker built into the console also kind of hurts it just a little bit. There should have been like a headphone jack on there, mainly because the screen does interfere with the volume a little bit, and that's why you get a little bit of buzzing on the speaker. But overall, would I recommend this game console to someone else? I am bitterly divided over this point. So I would actually recommend this console to anyone who would like to play games. I think it is great to have like a little mini arcade machine. So if you can get one, I would definitely recommend one. However, the only reason why I would not recommend one of these consoles is due to the price. Because these consoles are rare and very collectible, you will be paying a pretty penny for almost anything having to do with this console. So ultimately, the choice is up to you whether or not you want to say, is it worth it? Alright, well that about wraps it up for this video. Remember, if you like what you see, please hit that like and subscribe button, share with a friend. Remember, you can reach out to me on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook. Again, I want to thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned because I have more content coming. I'll see you guys next time. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video as I enjoyed making it for you. If you did like this video, please consider leaving a like and a comment below. Let me know what you liked about the video, let me know what you guys would like to see in the future. And if you'd like to see some of the videos I've already done, please consider clicking on one of the suggestions over here. And if you'd like to be notified when I post future content, please consider clicking on that subscribe button. And, by viewer request, it comes with frickin' lasers. Yep, that's lasers. That effect took about an hour and a half to make, so it better be worth it. I'm gonna keep doing it.